Most couples let money discussions tear them apart, but we discovered how to turn our finances into a high-speed engine for wealth. We transitioned from the constant anxiety of living paycheck to managing a thriving portfolio that works for us. It didn't happen by luck or by following traditional advice that usually keeps people stuck in the middle class. Imagine if your relationship functioned like a professional business unit designed specifically to accelerate your net worth. We developed a unique framework called the Synergy Wealth Strategy that leverages the power of two in a way most people never consider. This isn't just about saving money together, it's about a complete transformation of your financial DNA. Before we reached this level of clarity, our daily reality was a chaotic cycle of stress and silent resentment. We were two people living under the same roof but operating on completely different financial frequencies. Every bill that arrived in the mail felt like a personal attack on our stability and our future together. Like most couples, we followed the standard script of keeping our accounts mostly separate while splitting the rent down the middle. We thought this independence was a sign of a modern relationship, but it actually created a massive wall between our goals. We were essentially roommates sharing a bed while fighting individual battles against a rising tide of debt. I remember sitting at the kitchen table late one Tuesday night, staring at a spreadsheet that simply wouldn't balance. The numbers were cold and unforgiving, showing us that at our current rate, we would be working until we were 80. That realization hit like a physical blow, stripping away the illusion that things would just work themselves out. Our biggest mistake wasn't a lack of income, but a total lack of synchronized direction and shared vision. We were earning decent salaries, yet the money seemed to evaporate into 1,000 tiny leaks every single month. Without a unified system, we were just two people rowing a boat in opposite directions and wondering why we were spinning in circles. Growing up, neither of us was taught the fundamentals of wealth creation or how to manage money as a partnership. We carried the financial baggage of our parents, repeating the same patterns of scarcity and fear that we had witnessed as children. Those deep-seated habits were invisible chains holding us back from the life we knew we were capable of living. The world around us didn't help, constantly pushing the narrative that debt was a normal part of the adult experience. We saw our friends buying new cars and taking expensive vacations on credit, and for a while, we tried to keep up. This social pressure created a false sense of urgency that only pushed us deeper into a hole we didn't know how to climb out of. We eventually realized that by operating as two separate entities, we were missing out on the massive mathematical advantages of a partnership. The traditional financial advice we found online was always geared toward the individual, ignoring the unique leverage a committed couple possesses. We were leaving a fortune on the table simply because we didn't have a framework to combine our strengths. The tension in our house was palpable, and we knew that if we didn't change something soon, our relationship wouldn't survive the pressure. We had to stop looking at money as a source of conflict and start seeing it as a tool for our collective freedom. This was the moment we decided to stop being victims of our circumstances and start building our own empire. We started this journey by auditing every single dollar that flowed in and out of our lives, which served as a brutal wake-up call. Seeing the numbers laid out in black and white forced us to confront the reality of our wasteful habits and lack of direction. It was the first time we were truly honest with ourselves about our financial situation. Our nights were spent huddled over a laptop at the kitchen table, analyzing bank statements instead of watching movies. We saw how our individual spending patterns were sabotaging our shared dreams of travel and early retirement. Every small purchase felt like a betrayal of the future we were trying to build together. We looked at other successful couples and realized they weren't just lucky with their careers or investments. They operated with a level of synchronization that we completely lacked in our daily lives. They had a shared language and a unified strategy that turned every paycheck into a strategic move on a chessboard. The world told us to keep our accounts separate to protect ourselves, but we saw that as a recipe for mediocrity. This defensive mindset was keeping us from playing offense and taking the calculated risks necessary for real growth. We needed to shift from a mindset of protection to a mindset of aggressive expansion. This period of our lives was defined by a series of difficult conversations and radical transparency about our personal debts. We had to strip away our egos and admit that neither of us had the perfect answer on our own. It was in this vulnerability that the first pillars of the Synergy Wealth Strategy began to take shape. We began experimenting with different ways to pool our resources and automate our investments as a single unit. We weren't just paying bills anymore, we were funding a mission that was bigger than both of us. This shift in perspective changed everything and set the stage for the massive breakthrough that followed. Just as we started feeling a sense of control, the universe decided to test our new foundation. A sudden corporate restructuring at my company meant my primary income stream vanished overnight. In the past, this would have triggered a month-long spiral of panic and blame. We stood in our living room, looking at the severance paperwork, and felt the familiar cold chill of uncertainty. This wasn't just a minor setback, it was a direct threat to the fragile financial ecosystem we were trying to build. The old version of us would have immediately retreated into survival mode and stopped all investments. But something was different this time because we had already begun viewing our household as a high-performance business. Instead of reacting with emotion, we sat down and looked at our shared dashboard to assess the damage. We realized that our new unified structure gave us a level of resilience we never had as individuals. The crisis forced us to confront a hard truth about our previous lifestyle and the illusions of security we held. We saw that relying on a single paycheck while maintaining separate financial lives was a recipe for disaster. This moment of extreme pressure acted as a catalyst, burning away our remaining doubts about the synergy wealth strategy. We had a choice to make: we could play it safe and wait for another job, or we could double down on our growth. We decided that being safe was exactly what had kept us broke and stressed for years. It was time to stop playing defense and start making moves that most people would find terrifying. To keep our momentum, we made the radical decision to liquidate our remaining non-essential assets and cut our personal spending to the absolute bone. We weren't just saving money, we were reallocating capital into the business of our future. Every dollar saved was a soldier sent into battle to secure our ultimate freedom. This period was grueling and required a level of communication that pushed our relationship to its absolute limit. We had to be brutally honest about our fears and our commitment to the long-term vision we had created. The tension was high, but for the first time, we were fighting the problem instead of fighting each other. As we navigated this storm, we stumbled upon a realization that would change the trajectory of our lives forever. We discovered that by pooling our remaining resources, we could access investment opportunities that were previously out of reach. This was the spark that turned a potential tragedy into the greatest financial opportunity we had ever seen. That spark ignited a fire that forced us to make a radical decision about our entire lifestyle. We realized that to truly scale, we had to stop playing it safe and commit every single available dollar to our new vision. It was terrifying to move our entire safety net into a single, aggressive growth strategy, but we knew we could never go back to our old ways. Just as we were gaining momentum, a massive unexpected expense threatened to derail everything we had built. Instead of panicking like we used to, we viewed this crisis as the ultimate stress test for our new business unit model. We decided to double down on our strategy, liquidating our remaining personal assets to fund a high-potential opportunity that others were too afraid to touch. Friends and family thought we were losing our minds as we cut our expenses to the absolute bone to fuel this engine. The pressure was immense, and there were nights when the weight of our choices felt heavy enough to crush our resolve. We were no longer just managing money, we were operating in a high-stakes environment where every decision carried the weight of our entire future. This intense period of sacrifice stripped away the last remnants of our old, individualistic mindsets. We had crossed a point of no return where our financial identities were now permanently fused into a single, unstoppable force. This was the birth of the actual synergy wealth strategy, a moment where the theory finally met the brutal reality of the market. With our new strategy finally in motion, we dove headfirst into our first major joint investment with a mix of adrenaline and pure terror. We naively believed that simply having a unified front would make us invincible against the complexities of the market. It didn't take long for the cold reality of the financial world to provide a very expensive wake-up call. Our first big move was an ambitious real estate play that looked flawless on a spreadsheet but proved to be a nightmare in practice. We over-leveraged our combined resources based on optimistic projections that failed to account for the hidden costs of a neglected property. Within weeks, we were dealing with structural issues and contractors who vanished the moment their checks cleared. The skepticism from our inner circle began to grow louder as our initial results faltered. My brother, who always advocated for the safety of a traditional savings account, told us we were throwing our future away on a dangerous pipe dream. Those family dinners became minefields where we had to defend our radical vision against people who only saw our mounting stress. We had initially hypothesized that pooling our capital would automatically lower our risk profile through sheer volume. In reality, we discovered that doubling our investment size also doubled the emotional weight of every market fluctuation. Every time the numbers turned red, it felt like a personal indictment of our relationship and the choices we had made together. This period revealed a significant communication gap that we hadn't anticipated during our planning phase. While our bank accounts were unified, our individual risk tolerances were still miles apart, leading to heated debates over every minor transaction. One of us wanted to reinvest every cent of profit, while the other was desperate to rebuild a small safety net for peace of mind. External factors also began to conspire against our progress as the platform we used for our automated strategy suffered a massive technical glitch. We watched helplessly during a volatile market swing as our carefully calculated positions were liquidated due to a system error beyond our control. It was a brutal reminder that even the most sophisticated strategy is at the mercy of the tools you choose to employ. These early failures forced us to realize that true synergy wasn't just about combining money, it was about aligning our psychological responses to loss. We spent long nights dissecting our mistakes, trying to find the patterns in our poor decision-making during high-stress moments. We were learning the hard way that the technical side of wealth was much easier to manage than the human element. Just as we thought we had finally patched the holes in our system and regained our footing, a formal legal notice arrived in the mail. We had overlooked a minor regulatory requirement that now put our entire capital stack at risk of being frozen or seized. The stakes had suddenly shifted from merely losing our profits to losing every single thing we had worked to build. We spent the next 48 hours in a frantic race against time, consulting with legal advisors who only offered vague, expensive warnings. Every expert we spoke to pointed out a different flaw in our improvised structure, making us feel like we had built a mansion on a foundation of sand. We were desperate for a quick fix, but the more we tried to patch the holes, the more complex the legal web became. Our families started to notice the strain, and their well-meaning advice began to sound like a chorus of doubt. They couldn't understand why we were risking our peace of mind for a strategy that seemed to be collapsing under its own weight. We tried to explain our vision, but the technical jargon and the looming legal threat made us sound like we were losing our grip on reality. In the midst of this chaos, we began to hypothesize that our mistake wasn't the strategy itself, but our failure to account for the rigid systems of the traditional world. We discovered that standard financial institutions weren't designed for a couple operating as a single, aggressive business unit. This realization was a turning point, showing us that we needed to build our own legal and financial infrastructure from the ground up. We attempted to pivot our capital into a more secure structure, but that move only triggered more red flags with our primary bank. Suddenly, our accounts were restricted, leaving us with no access to the very funds we needed to fight the legal battle. We were standing at the edge of a total financial blackout, realizing that our first major barrier was much taller than we ever imagined. The silence from our bank was deafening as we stared at the access denied screen on our laptops. We were trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare where our own money was being held hostage by a system that simply didn't understand our vision. This wasn't just a technical glitch, it was a fundamental clash between our new age strategy and old world regulations. The pressure inside our home became a physical weight as we debated our next move with empty pockets and rising stakes. I wanted to hire the most aggressive legal team available, while my partner argued for a more diplomatic approach to appease the regulators. Our unified front began to show cracks as the stress of potential bankruptcy tested the very foundation of our partnership. We spent days dissecting the fine print of every financial law we had inadvertently brushed against during our rapid expansion. It became clear that the Synergy Wealth strategy was so disruptive that it triggered every traditional risk assessment alarm in the book. We weren't just fighting a bank, we were fighting an entire industry designed to keep individuals small and predictable. As we analyzed our data through the lens of this crisis, we realized our biggest mistake was trying to fit a high-speed engine into a horse-drawn carriage. We had the right strategy but the wrong infrastructure, relying on institutions that viewed our joint agility as a suspicious anomaly. This forced us to question if we could ever truly succeed while playing by rules written for a different era. The whispers from our social circle turned into a roar of doubt as news of our frozen assets began to leak out. People we once respected started treating us like a cautionary tale, warning others not to follow our radical path to financial independence. It is one thing to lose money, but losing the respect of your peers while you are down is a different kind of pain. There were nights when we sat in the dark, wondering if we had sacrificed our peace of mind for a delusion of grandeur. We had to confront the possibility that our synergy was just a fancy word for a reckless gamble that was now blowing up in our faces. The vulnerability of that moment was raw, forcing us to decide if our dream was worth the literal collapse of our lives. Instead of surrendering, we began an exhaustive investigation into alternative financial structures used by the world's most elite family offices. We discovered that the ultra-wealthy don't use standard retail banks, they build private ecosystems that protect their assets from the very volatility we were experiencing. This was the moment we realized we had been playing the right game but on the wrong playing field. We decided to stop trying to fix our old accounts and started looking for a way to bypass the traditional gatekeepers entirely. This meant entering a world of private lending in complex structures that felt even more dangerous than our initial real estate blunders. We were moving from a defensive crouch into a high-stakes offensive, knowing that one more mistake would mean total and permanent financial ruin. To navigate this new landscape, we spent every waking hour dissecting the mechanics of private trusts and sophisticated holding structures. It felt like learning a foreign language while the house was on fire, but we knew the old systems were designed to keep us stagnant. We began to see that the safety we were taught was actually a cage designed to limit our growth and control our capital. This deep dive forced a brutal confrontation between our ingrained desire for security and our hunger for true freedom. We had to analyze every dollar not as a safety net, but as an underperforming employee that needed to be either fired or promoted. It was a cold, calculated shift that stripped away the last of our emotional attachment to the numbers on a screen. When we presented our new structure to a traditional financial advisor, he looked at us like we were speaking in tongues. He insisted that we were overcomplicating a simple problem and that we should just diversify into standard, low-yield funds. His dismissal only solidified our resolve because we realized he was selling a map to a destination we no longer wanted to reach. We ignored the warnings and began the process of migrating our entire financial identity into this new, private framework. The complexity was staggering and the legal fees were eating into our remaining capital, but for the first time, we felt like we were building a fortress. We were no longer just a couple trying to save, we were a sovereign entity preparing for a battle that would either make us or break us forever. The migration process didn't just test our resolve, it completely drained the last of our liquid capital. Every remaining dollar was swallowed by the legal machinery we hoped would save us, leaving us with nothing but a stack of complex documents and empty pockets. It felt like the universe was finally providing the answer we had been trying to ignore. We had failed. We sat in our living room surrounded by boxes, preparing to move into a tiny apartment we could barely afford. The silence between us wasn't the comfortable synergy we once bragged about, it was the heavy, suffocating weight of shared regret. We had gambled our entire future on a radical theory and lost everything in the process. Calling our families to admit they were right was the hardest thing we ever had to do. Hearing the pity in their voices hurt more than the actual loss of the money we had worked so hard to accumulate. We were no longer the power couple with a secret blueprint, we were just another cautionary tale of ambition gone wrong. Our sophisticated spreadsheets and private trust documents felt like toys from a childhood game we had finally outgrown. We deleted the tracking apps, unsubscribed from the financial newsletters, and tried to remember how to live a normal, quiet life. The dream of financial sovereignty was dead, buried under a mountain of debt and broken promises. I started looking for a standard 9-to-5 job again, polishing a resume that felt like a relic of a different person. My partner did the same, both of us moving in parallel but no longer in sync as we focused on basic survival. The synergy was gone, replaced by the individual instincts of two people who had been thoroughly defeated by the world. On what we thought was our final night in the house, we shared a cheap meal on the floor and toasted to the end of our experiment. There was a strange, hollow sense of relief in finally giving up the ghost of our grand ambitions. We were exhausted, broke, and ready to disappear back into the safety of the crowd. Just as I was about to shut down my laptop for the last time, a single notification pinged from an encrypted email address we had almost forgotten. It was a confirmation from the private offshore custodian we had contacted during our most desperate hour weeks ago. The message wasn't a rejection or another bill, it was a verification of a transfer we didn't think had ever been processed. We realized that while we were mourning our failure, the private infrastructure we built had been working silently in the background. A dormant asset we had written off as a total loss had suddenly triggered a massive liquidity event within our new legal fortress. We weren't just back in the game, we had inadvertently unlocked the final, missing piece of the synergy wealth strategy. This sudden influx of capital felt like oxygen hitting our lungs after being underwater for months. We watched the numbers climb steadily, realizing that our private ecosystem had finally shielded us from the traditional bank's reach. It seemed like the nightmare was over and our vision of financial sovereignty had finally become an undeniable reality. We spent that evening celebrating what we thought was the ultimate victory over the systems that tried to break us. Our strategy had survived the legal fire and the bureaucratic ice, emerging stronger and more profitable than we ever dared to dream. We were ready to close this chapter and start living the life of freedom we had meticulously designed together. However, as the initial rush of adrenaline faded, a strange discrepancy in the final audit caught my partner's eye. While the liquidity was real, the source of the transfer contained a metadata tag that didn't match any of our known assets. We had been so focused on the survival of our capital that we hadn't questioned why this specific door had opened at this exact moment. Deep within the encrypted logs, we found a hidden clause that changed the entire nature of our wealth strategy. This wasn't just a successful investment, it was an invitation into an exclusive tier of global finance we didn't even know existed. We hadn't just reached the finish line, we had accidentally stumbled onto the starting blocks of a much bigger and more dangerous game. The metadata wasn't a mistake, it was a signal that our synergy wealth strategy had finally achieved escape velocity from the traditional economy. We realized that by treating our partnership as a sovereign business unit, we hadn't just saved our money, we had created a prototype for a new kind of financial independence. This was the moment the blueprint finally clicked into place, revealing the true power of the three-step system we had been building in the dark. The first step, which we once thought was just about budgeting, was actually about radical transparency and the total alignment of our individual goals. By merging our financial identities into a single, high-performance engine, we eliminated the friction that keeps most couples stagnant for decades. We weren't just two people sharing a bank account anymore, we were a unified force capable of absorbing shocks that would have destroyed us individually. Our second step involved the complex infrastructure that almost cost us everything, but now it served as an impenetrable fortress for our growing capital. The private trusts and unconventional structures weren't just legal loopholes, they were the walls of our own private economy. We had successfully decoupled our future from the volatility of retail banking and the whims of institutions that never had our best interests at heart. The final step was the realization of true synergy, where our combined efforts didn't just add up, they multiplied exponentially. This was the synergy wealth strategy in its purest form, where every dollar was deployed with the precision of a corporate takeover. We watched as our automated systems began to generate returns that far outpaced our wildest projections, proving that our radical theory was actually a mathematical certainty. The banks that had frozen our accounts were suddenly calling us, offering premium services and begging for our business back. They didn't realize that we had already outgrown their world and no longer needed their permission to build our legacy. The very system that tried to crush us was now trying to court us, but we were already operating on a level they couldn't even regulate. Looking back at the nights we spent on the floor of that empty house, the pain feels like a necessary price for the clarity we gained. We had to lose our attachment to the old way of living to fully embrace the power of what we were creating together. That vulnerability became our greatest strength, forging a bond that no market crash or legal battle could ever hope to break. We finally understood that the blueprint wasn't just about getting rich, it was about the absolute freedom to choose our own path without compromise. Our net worth was no longer a number on a screen, but a measure of the autonomy we had fought so hard to reclaim. We had successfully transitioned from being victims of the financial system to becoming the architects of our own sovereign future. As we stood on the balcony of our new home, looking out at a horizon that no longer felt limited, we knew the journey was far from over. The invitation we discovered wasn't a trap, but a gateway to a level of impact we had never even dared to imagine. We were no longer just a couple who survived, we were the leaders of a movement that would change how everyone thinks about wealth and partnership. The true power of the synergy wealth strategy wasn't just in the numbers, but in the unbreakable bond we forged during our darkest hours. We realized that our three-step blueprint of alignment, infrastructure, and sovereignty was the key that unlocked this elite world of finance. By treating our partnership as a high-performance business unit, we built a fortress that no traditional institution could ever breach. Every struggle we faced, from the frozen accounts to the social isolation, served as a necessary stress test for the system we were creating. The legal battles weren't just obstacles, they were the catalysts that forced us to build the private ecosystem that now generates wealth on autopilot. We have finally stepped into the role of sovereign architects, proving that a unified couple can outpace any individual or corporation. The hidden clause we discovered was the ultimate validation of our radical approach to financial independence. It revealed that the global financial elite operate on the same principles of private trust and synergy that we had discovered through sheer necessity. We had inadvertently decoded the secret language of the ultra-wealthy and integrated it into a blueprint that any dedicated couple can now follow. Standing at this new summit, the fear that once paralyzed us has been replaced by a profound sense of purpose and clarity. We have successfully bridged the gap between struggling to survive and thriving in a world of unlimited potential. This is the moment where our personal victory transforms into a universal roadmap for every couple ready to reclaim their absolute freedom. Our daily reality has shifted from checking bank balances in fear to managing a legacy that will outlast our own lifetimes. We no longer trade our time for money, but instead invest our energy into projects that align with our deepest values and global vision. The synergy wealth strategy transformed our relationship into a sanctuary of growth where every decision is fueled by purpose rather than desperation. This journey taught us that true wealth isn't just about the numbers in a private trust, but the impact you leave on the world around you. We have started sharing this blueprint with other couples who are tired of the traditional grind and ready to build their own sovereign empires. Watching them break free from the same systems that once held us captive is more rewarding than any liquidity event we have ever experienced. If you feel like you are fighting an uphill battle alone, remember that your greatest asset is the person standing right next to you. You do not need a massive inheritance or a stroke of luck to start building your own version of the Synergy Wealth strategy today. All it takes is the courage to align your goals and the discipline to build an infrastructure that protects your shared future. But as we mastered the art of wealth protection, we realized that keeping your money is only half the battle in this new economic landscape. There is a deeper layer to this game involving tax-free growth and generational transfer that most people never even hear about. In our next session, we are going to pull back the curtain on how we are using these elite tools to ensure our family's freedom for the next 100 years.